The Talk Station presents Faith Matters, a look at contemporary stories and issues from a faith perspective. While this is a pre-recorded show, we are interested in your ideas, comments, and questions, and we urge you to email them to faithmatters@thetalkstation.com.
Give me faith, trust what you say, that you're good and your love is great. I'm broken inside, I give you my life.
And now on the Talk Station, Faith Matters.
And welcome to our program, Faith Matters, here on the Talk Station. I'm Ben Ball, and joined with Reverend Robert Corrigan from Chaplain by the Sea in Emerald Isle, and Bishop Doc Loomis, who joins us as Bishop in Residence at All Saints Anglican Church in Newport, and also Reverend Mark Woods from Cherry Point United Methodist Church. Tried to do that without notes, guys.
Yeah, well, you got through it.
Good job. Good
Yes,
job.
I'm trying to do that. All right, but we'll welcome you back to our program as we take a look at some news. Just a follow-up on a story that we've done here before. Is about a high school coach, actually assistant high school football coach at Bremerton High School in Bremerton, Washington. And he is the coach who has become a national story lately, even though this is a practice he's been doing since 2008, of praying after the game. After the game is over, he'll go out to the center 50-yard line and the center of the field and offer a prayer silently. And he's been doing this since 2008. Over time, other players would join him, fans would join him, opposing players would join him. He would do this at away games as well, and it became kind of an after game ritual. Well, it was for him anyway, but it now has drawn the attention of those who believe that this is now creating a public forum for prayer in a public school, in a public setting. This is I know, Doc, you brought this to our attention the first time up with this program, and now the school district has placed him on paid leave, and so he's not supposed to be there at the game. So was this kind of, we were just waiting for this cleat to drop, so to speak? I mean, this was going to be coming. We knew it was coming.
Absolutely. I don't think there was any question the school was in a difficult position, because we mentioned last time we were together that there isn't really a very clear legal position that the school can look at and say yes or no. So whenever that's the case, we put people on leave and pay them. It's just that's kind of the way it goes.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, that was my question. Paid administrative leave means he gets to sit home and be paid. Is that correct?
That's right.
Right.
Why is this a problem?
Well,
How do I get that? That's what I want to know.
It's as they investigate, because often it'll follow, then he gets fired. So after some period of time, or not, or reinstated. When it's ambiguous like this is when that usually is that's what's used.
Well, it brings the crowd noise down. No, it really does. I mean, I don't mean that. That's not a pun. It does. The people that are upset with him, that don't want him on property at the game in the classroom, are happy because he's gone. The people who support him are okay because he hasn't been fired. So it's a way of diffusing and letting the air out of it.
Folks at Liberty Institute in Plano, Texas, are serving as his legal counsel here, and everybody is asking whether or not this is going to go to court. And Robert, this is your experience here, is that a lot of these issues do end up in court, right?
Well, they eventually do. You know, we've got this becomes another one of those freedom of religion issues, and being able to express your faith. And so I think it's interesting the way in the article this is starting to shift, and it is that it's being couched even in the article around the constitutional right to religious freedom. So whether it's a Christian out there bowing and worshiping Jesus, or if it's a Satanist bowing out there and worshiping Satan, basically, their argument is we need to protect the right to be able to publicly express your faith. And so I think that's what it's kind of, and that's where the horns of the dilemma have stuck the school board,
With the
because
Satanists?
I was going to say,
Yeah, there
speaking
you
of
go.
horns, yes,
yeah,
this
I thought
is
that would be a good play on
A story out of the Seattle Times is that a Seattle Satanist group has been invited by the student body president to come and give an invocation, is what he said, although it's not clear whether or not he had the authority to ask any group to do such. But now that he has been suspended, they're talking about maybe they'll be there, maybe they won't.
Yeah, they may show up.
They might show up.
Yeah.
But the story was and remains is that this coach is still arguing this strictly along constitutional lines. And in fact, he when the student body president did that, the coach texted him and said, "Bravo," says, "You are way to stand up, proud of you. I agree with that. Anyone of any faith should be able to pray to whoever or whatever they believe in. That's what the Constitution is for. I said I would meet them, and I didn't have a problem with them. Their beliefs are their beliefs and is protected by the Constitution. I hope you understand that I'm not making a Christian-only stance. It's a constitutional rights stance. Anyways, it takes a lot of guts to stand up for what you believe in. Very proud of your courage." That's what he texted back to the kid who invited the Satanists. So again, he's making the argument, and Robert, you've said in the past, the bright line argument of that the Constitution provides for this protection, and that a local government can't change that.
Yeah, I mean, there's an accommodation that has to take place. I mean, I think that's what we've seen through all these Supreme Court hearings, is that there is that local government needs to accommodate. Now, accommodate, it can get, that's kind of hard to peg, and so that's what they're struggling with. I mean, we've gone from somebody doing at the end of a game, after the game is over, the whistle's blown, the scoreboard's cleared, and he's walking out on the field and praying, and people are gathering, which is not an invocation or a benediction, or it's not an official part of the game. It's a individual worship, a form of worship. Let's put it that way. Now, this inviting the Satanists to do an invocation is a completely different matter, that then an invocation to the game before the game becomes a part of the game.
Yes.
And so now, but to me, what they're doing is just trying to push the school board to
clarify this.
Put some lines around it.
Right.
Give us some boundaries.
Mark, you're about ready to explode over here.
I missed last week, so I'm going to sound extra crazy this week just to catch up with what I usually talk about. I think that the inviting of the Satanists to this thing is a wonderful way to point out the absurdity of both sides, both the school board and the religious freedom that this guy is touting from constitutional. I think both are muddy. For instance, and we know this, right? He's going to argue this coach is going to say it's about religious freedom, it's about constitutional thing. So therefore, it's really not about being Christian, right? It's just about anybody can come. That's why he would support the Satanists, right? So it's not really about being Christian, right?
That's what he said in
so,
the end.
So
he
here,
was quoted as
which
saying
for
that.
any Christian should be a problem, right? I mean, I think on some level. But then on the other hand, you have the other people that are also talking about religious freedom in a completely opposite or dialectical way. So to invite the Satanists actually points out the absurdity of both sides, which I just find absolutely brilliant. I mean, I don't know. Respond to that. I just think it's hilarious.
Doc?
Yes, well, as always, Mark, insightful, and I'm in complete.
So that means
agreement.
no, it wasn't insightful.
No, it's totally insightful. You're right. I mean, you brought this up when we were in last week. You were talking about when people battle against prayer at the school board. That should be an indication to us that prayer actually has weight, it has meaning, it has power. And in the same way, I think you make a really good argument here. But so here's the thing I want to know, because this is really the story about a Christian man taking a Christian stand. He gets confronted, so it becomes a constitutional thing. Trust me, when he went out on the field the first time, he did not step out to make a constitutional point. He went out on the field to commune with God. Mm-hmm. Period. Am I wrong?
You can assume that.
Well,
but we don't know that.
Well, I think that's. I think
he
that's
may
safe.
have had
I think that's
mixed
safe.
I'm
motives.
feeling comfortable in that assumption.
I would be too.
So now it has clearly become or increased, in its stature as a constitutional issue. The question I have is going back to what Mark said, a little snippet of what he said, which I don't want to pass over, and that is, how do you, as a Christian, send a text to somebody and say, "I'm so proud of you for inviting Satanists to the field"? I mean, as a Christian person, you said it. I mean, we should have a problem. He should have a problem with that. If this is a Christian man and he went out in the field, yeah, I guess if it happens, it would not be a stumbling block to us. But I'm not going to encourage somebody to invite Satan.
I just think your first assumption is probably incorrect.
So
you think he was making a constitutional point?
I do. I think. Look, this goes way back. I mean, this is not like the first time. This isn't the first rodeo. I mean, this stuff has the school separation, church state, all of that has been a big issue for a long time, and I think he's testing. Now, I believe he's a Christian. I believe he's expressing himself in worship, but I also believe he has an agenda, and I believe his agenda is to clarify this point.
Let me jump in here for a second, just before we finish this segment. Is that
Please.
there's
I don't want to finish.
yet another news
Can't
item
let
here
Robert
too.
have the last word. Just kidding.
Another item here is a Texas principal has been said he's no longer allowed to speak at the "See You at the Poll" event that takes place over a complaint from an atheist who complained about that. And that is in Prosper, Texas. So these kinds of discussions and arguments all continue on. And we'll have more to come in a moment here on Faith Matters on the talk station, FM 107 and AM 1240. Welcome back to Faith Matters here on the talk station, FM 107 and AM 1240. And I'm Ben Ball, along with Reverend Mark Woods and Bishop Doc Loomis and Reverend Robert Cornegie. And we're talking about another issue that's come up in this season. As we go into this season, it's actually the season of planning for next summer when all the weddings take place. And we live in a wedding destination area. I mean, a lot of people come here and book places for weddings. The story that comes out of the Denison Forum on Truth and Culture, called "Going to the Courthouse, Millennials Got to Get Married?" There's question marks all around. Are millennials still going to the chapel? Are they even getting married? Should we check Facebook to find out? While your Facebook feed may be inundated with wedding picture kudzu, social science research is sharing a different story. Recently, a research out of the Public Religion Research Institute suggests that millennials are not only holding off on getting married, but when they do, they are opting for places other than churches. 39% of married millennials report that their wedding ceremony took place in a place of worship and was administered by a religious leader. Approximately the same number, 37%, reported that their wedding ceremony took place somewhere other than a religious venue and was administered by someone other than a religious official. 65% of seniors, 65 and older, reported getting married in a religious setting, while only 20% said they forsook the religious setting and official. So the trending here is something I think we've all seen. This is that more and more people are choosing to get married in a destination setting instead of getting married and often with a either justice of the peace or an internet ordained person, and not with the religious liturgy at all, too. Yeah. So, any feelings about this, Mark?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting because marriage has sort of, and maybe it's always been like this, I don't know, but it's sort of has become about the couple, right? It's about the two of them. It's about their love for each other. I've been married long enough I'm going to get myself in trouble if my wife listens, but I've been married long enough, not too long, but long enough to realize this whole thing really isn't about us just loving each other. You know what I mean? There's sometimes where we really don't do that very well. And so, I mean, I think I've been to a few weddings that are like this. that I did not perform that were performed by a non-religious leader, and it was outside or something like this, and it struck me as so humorous that they use the language without using any religious language, and so everything had to be about just their love for each other. And I thought when I got married that I loved my wife, right? I thought I knew what that was. I still don't now, and I think that's part of the problem of our view of marriage is we think it's about love, we think it's about the two of the couple, and Christian marriage is not that. I mean, that's part of it, but really it's kind of publicly confessing this and saying, God, there's no way we can do this unless you help us do this, right? And we've sort of removed that. And, I might even suggest, that perhaps that's why, divorce rate among a lot of us is higher now, because it's up to us to love. Like, if it's up to me just to love my wife and that's what's going to sustain this relationship, let's just end that mess now. It's just not going to happen. I am going to fail. She is going to fail. I mean, the point of Christian marriage is to say, hey, look, we're both going to fail at this love thing. God, could you help us love each other or train us and form and shape us so that we can learn to love one another?
As the word Robert Holy dropped from matrimony.
Holy matrimony, yeah. Yeah, no, it's destination wedding now. And, look, we're all influenced by the media. We're all influenced by these things. And how many wedding movies have you been to that are just where the wedding itself
on a cliff, overlooking
yeah,
the ocean,
I mean,
on the
it's
beach,
just
right.
this fairy tale, the Princess and the White Knight thing, and so look, fewer millennials are identifying the church as a sacred place to them. Mm-hmm. And so therefore, when they think of these opportunities to get together and marry and all that, they're gonna be, church is gonna be on the list, but it's gonna be down the list. The main reason for, it's kind of plan B. The first plan A is out on the beach, barefooted, with the wind blowing and in linen, homemade clothes, and all. That was our wedding. We had a hippie wedding.
I was about to say, Robert, that you must be talking from experience.
This is getting personal now. Josie made my shirt that I wore. It was organic. We could have had it on the menu if we wanted to, because everything was organic in our wedding. It was outdoors, and listen, we sang "Amazing Grace." Mm-hmm. And we sang the old Shaker song, "It's a Gift to Be Simple."
Yeah.
Because the person that was singing those songs was a fan of Joan Baez, and Joan Baez sang those songs. And so it wasn't until later that we were kind of going, well, golly, we weren't even really Christians, but we had all this Christian symbolism. So, yeah, I don't know. These kind of articles, when they get real statistical on us, they sort of, this has been going on. This trend's been going on for a long time.
Yeah. Doc, you look in pain.
No, I'm looking at Robert and thinking, when did the organic part of your life stop?
Right after the wedding.
Because you can't see, but he's got a McDonald's big breakfast in front of him right now in styrofoam. So
honey, wait a minute. I got to clarify. I do not have that Josie in front of me right now.
That's right.
So Josie
as he slides it across the table.
He actually has a bottle of water, so that's good. He's got a bottle of water.
It has become my son, who's 39 years old, did a destination wedding. And when he asked me about doing a destination wedding, I said, wow, that's a great idea. I hope you all will have a good time. But so they did their wedding, if you will. They did their ceremony, or holy matrimony, in a church presided over by Daddy, which was a lot of fun. And then they got off on a plane, and I hope none of his friends are listening, but about 40 people paid $1 billion to go to somewhere in Mexico and watch him get remarried while he was already married.
An affirmation.
Whatever.
Yeah.
And I don't think they
Blessing.
know that no, it was a service.
It was
And
the whole
I don't
thing.
think if they knew that he'd already been married that they'd have paid that much money. This is the big thing now, is the destination wedding. And so we have to outdo one another. So my oldest daughter is a, what do you call it, a wedding photographer.
Oh,
Well, she's a photographer, and she does a lot of weddings, and it's a hoot because I look at the pictures she posts on her Facebook page of where people get married, and it is absolutely a riot. What they wear and where they go, and it's in buses, and I did a wedding in a cave. That was the best ever, and we got Can you say pooped on the radio?
You did.
Okay, bats. There was bat guano coming, yes. And so I made a decision about maybe 8 or 9 years ago, I think, that if you want to get married, then this is a thing that is called holy. And the part of it that I do is the holy part, and anybody can do the other part. And so we're going to do it in a sacred space. We're going to do it with God present, and we're going to talk about exactly what Mark talked about, that this is actually, this is the joining of one flesh, and there's a very strong influence of the Lord in this thing, and that people that wanted to get married outside of that, well, that was just delightful, but it wouldn't happen in our church, and I wouldn't preside.
right.
But yes, this is the trend. I watched, you watch the, what's the one about the dress on TV now that
Say
my
Yes to
kids
the
like?
Dress.
Yes, they watch that and they think, well, I want to have this dress, and I got to have, old rusty pails filled with wild carrots and candles from Yankee Candle, and yeah, you got it.
You make a good point, Doc. because
Yes, I do.
it's-
I do.
I mean, economically,
Yes.
weddings are huge. I mean, and the $200 that you pay to have at Cherry Point United Methodist Church is quite inexpensive compared to the destination wedding in Mexico where you're flying everybody to wherever it is. And so economically there is a lot of that going on, and it's economically driven, I think, on some level. I mean, that's a part of it.
Well, and it also puts often a lot of young couples into debt right away. That's-
And this is an interesting thing, because I know we're running out of time here, but in Canada, do you know they do this backwards from the way we do it? Actually, they do it right. Receptions and weddings, they do a thing. Have you ever heard of a buck and doe? It's a play on words, obviously,
yeah.
but they actually rent a hall, and then all the friends pay money to come to the reception. The reception is then paid for, and the overage, the money that's made on the deal, goes to the bride and groom, and they walk off instead of being deeply in debt. Wake up, America, this is for you. Instead of being deeply in debt, they actually walk out with a great cash bonus, and everybody has a good time because no one has to buy a gift. You just pay a little bit more than you would normally
the
for your
reception.
meal. Isn't that
It's
brilliant?
like a cover charge, yeah.
This is, Canadians thought of this. This is good.
That's good. That's good.
Well, and, in our again, we only have less than a minute, but we have different people represented here, and we have different authority in weddings. We're talking about, as a licensed local pastor, I have very strict authority about what I can do
Right.
in weddings. You're going to be ordained, and you'll have broader authority about that
Right.
in the
Yeah.
Methodist Church. Or even if the state of North Carolina still allows you to do it anywhere you want, but it's there's still some, and so I don't know how that works for everybody else here, but it is, and sometimes it helps us to kind of limit our discussion about destination weddings. We can say no to those. This is Faith Matters on the Talk Station, FM 107 and AM 1240. We'll have more to come in a moment. Welcome back to Faith Matters on the Talk Station, FM 107 and AM 1240, and thank you for joining us here today. I'm Ben Ball, along with Bishop Doc Loomis, Reverend Mark Woods, and Reverend Robert Cornegie. We're talking about this segment, about a story that has some reverberation around here. We have seen some other similar stories, but this is actually now the Navy signal. It's from a website called Virtue Online. And Navy signals course reversal in refusing to charge Chaplain. And Wes Motter will now continue his service as a chaplain in the United States Navy. All charges against him have been dismissed for lacking merit. We did the original story on this, Robert, was some months ago.
Yeah, it was quite a while back.
Chaplain Motter, a 19-year veteran with exemplary record, was relieved of his duty last March as chaplain to the Navy's Nuclear Power School in Charleston, South Carolina. He was charged with being unable to function in the environment of the Navy Nuclear Power Command. It soon became evident that it was intentionally targeted by an openly gay partnered naval officer who came to him under the pretense of seeking counseling. During their sessions, Motter was continually pressed for his personal opinions regarding homosexuality. After sharing his beliefs, he was charged with discrimination. Additional charges cited were having berated a female sailor for being pregnant out of wedlock and criticizing another for immodesty of dress. Chaplain Motter had served with distinction throughout his career, having previously been assigned to the elite Navy SEALs. He was given the Navy's highest rating and described as the best of the best. Prior to being charged with gross negligence and dereliction of duty, he had received recommendation for accelerated promotion from the very man who ordered him relieved of duty. And so this story then concludes, though, with the Navy actually reversing those charges. Robert, when we initially discussed this, I remember we were talking about how it did seem to be, although it wasn't revealed at the time, but there was a great suspicion about how this was set up and by whom and why. And it seems that justice has taken a while to turn here, but it does seem to have come around to its senses.
Yeah, that's somewhat encouraging, isn't it? That the wheels of justice are slow, but they do turn. And in this case, a man who has obviously served his nation well to have been sort of set up like this is a pretty scary thing. Now, it doesn't, as far as I saw, talk about if any charges were false accusations or anything against the one who brought these charges.
Right.
We don't know where that's going, but so there should be some sort of deterrent put in there to make sure that if you're going to bring charges, don't trump these things up. Don't play that game. But it's tough. Basically the chaplains, the vision, the new Navy or the new military armed forces vision really is that chaplains are basically social workers.
Well, the quote in the article is that they were that the chaplain's role was shocked by the guy who wrote this, who had been a chaplain himself for 30 years, says he was shocked by an assertion in this case that the chaplain's role is to help them feel better about themselves, and the Navy has authority to fire anyone who doesn't follow orders or the military's regulation.
That to be affirmed,
right,
in their whatever their particular position is.
Mm-hmm.
That the chaplain is just there to affirm them in that. And now, that of course is not historically accurate.
Mark, you work with a lot of military personnel.
Yeah, that's a tough gig. I mean, that's a tough gig, a Navy chaplain or any kind of chaplain that is tasked with that, because, I mean, most faiths are not just about affirming us and what we think. You know what I mean? Christianity is about sometimes the opposite.
Challenging.
And to not be able to do that would be tough. And we've talked before. I mean, I think there is a very, very real tension between the church and state, a tension that I think should be there. And I think that this Navy chaplain was right on. He's right on that, right in the middle of that tension. Never should Christianity in any way not be in tension with war or with the state or the economic system or anything like that. There should be that tension there, and the reason I started my comment with this is a tough gig. I mean, if you're a chaplain, if you're a Christian chaplain or whatever, you're right in that tension. You're right in the middle of that tension.
And probably it's the most tense is if you're going to be in the Department of Defense.
Mm-hmm.
Probably. And Doc, have you brought this article to our attention? What drew you to it?
Well, I think, like Robert, I love the fact that the tables of justice have turned a little and that things are kind of heading in a little bit better direction. It is extremely difficult, Ben, to be a chaplain right now in any branch of the service. Robert may be overgeneralizing that they're nothing more than social work. We did a story, I don't remember how long ago it was, but it was about the emergence of the Christian church in China. And one of the things we noted is that local officials in China, province by province and even city by city, could choose to enforce or not enforce laws that would otherwise that would inhibit the church. The military is a lot that way. So I have very dear friends who are. When I went in, I wanted to be a chaplain. I really did. I thought it would be really great. And I've met a lot of people who did make the decision to become chaplains, and most of them would say to us, "Well, no, actually, I can talk about Jesus. I can be really open." But I also have friends that are chaplains, and it just seems to depend, where their duty station is at the time, and of course and then those situations are even tighter controlled if somebody is in, say, a Muslim country, where even wearing the cross on the lapel has been the traditional chaplain's cross has been taken away. Generally speaking, yes, it's hard to be a chaplain in the military right now, but I would say that it is one of the most important. We direct a lot of people towards chaplaincy because we can actually see over the horizon, and I think what we're seeing right now is in the United States military there is actually a change coming, and I think people are beginning to realize that that God can be an answer to some of life's most complex and frustrating questions. And the military, I actually think, is looking for more than secular answers to people's problems. Now, that may come as a surprise to you, but I'm beginning to see that, not just in this article, but all across the military.
The article goes on to say the Navy Chaplains Corps seal contains the motto "Cooperation without compromise." A military officer's oath of allegiance is to the Constitution of the United States, not to any individual organization. It is incumbent upon any military member to challenge higher authority if the orders or regulations are believed to be illegal. The Navy made a good start in reversing the destructive 30-year trend. It is critical all facts concerning the conspiracy be made public. Part of this was, if you remember the story right, that he was assigned, this other person who complained was assigned as a chaplain's assistant.
That's correct.
And the chaplain's assistant is not required to be of the faith of the chaplain. So it's just an administrative position. Right. But it was from that they began to have these discussions, and it became unclear as to what part of this was counseling and what part of this was inquiring and being an inquisitor.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
But, Mark, you have brought up before about where theology is often done in the local church. And then the chaplaincy, this looks like a great opportunity, really, for true theological work.
Yeah, no doubt. I think that, and I don't really know, y'all probably know exactly how the hierarchy of chaplaincy works in military a little bit. But, I mean, when you're in a situation, I imagine, as a military chaplain, a lot of the theology that you're going to do, you're doing, right? Like, it's not being handed down to you, right? Like in maybe a Catholic setting where theology is more handed down, perhaps, and I feel like this as a Methodist, too. I mean, it's really, you're doing the theology as you are living as a pastor.
You're living it out.
Right, yeah. And so it's not something that is kind of handed down to you. And I imagine it's very similar for a military, chaplain, that they're doing theology while they're sitting there counseling or while they're doing their job. That is part of their theology.
They're not going back and looking at Augustine's just war theory necessarily.
Well, no one wants to do that.
But they are dealing with our persons and their issues. Right?
Well, and I think that's an important point to make here, is that not only has the military changed, but the as we were just talking about with the millennials, the those that are volunteering to come into the military,
the complexion of the military
has changed.
Yes.
And so that and just the fact that they're volunteers in these positions. I'm thinking of the ones that are being counseled
Right.
rather than having been drafted or, they didn't have much choice. They just had to go. That changes their expectations of the services that they're going to get back from the military. And of course, the chaplaincy is one of the services that the military provides for them to adjust and to this new life. And everything is so sort of up in the air right now around sexuality and relationships and all of that. That as you said, it's going to be a really tough. You being Mark said what a tough gig this is, and we have in our church we have a retired Navy psychiatrist who is they work sort of parallel with the chaplaincy, and he's a Christian. And so he had, as much as he can talk about it, he would talk about how the dilemma that they're in, because
sure,
it's sort of a cloistered community to a degree.
No, I think that's right.
And so, the nature of that is very different than being in a church and people coming in from the community. So, yeah.
Again, we appreciate your opinions here, too. Email to faithmatters@thetalkstation.com, and we'll have more to come on Faith Matters with our final segment next. Welcome back to Faith Matters on the Talk Station, FM 107 and AM 1240. And thanks for joining us here today. I'm Ben Ball, along with Bishop Doc Loomis, Reverend Mark Woods, and Reverend Robert Cornegie. We're talking about, on this last segment together, a new survey that's out by people that we have quoted and cited often. I think the Pew Research Center has a survey, must be once a week that comes out. But this one on religion and science, and the subtitle being, Highly Religious Americans Are Less Likely Than Others to See Conflict Between Faith and Science. Are science and religion at odds with each other? This is a topic we've addressed on a number of occasions in a variety of formats. A majority of the public says science and religion often conflict, with nearly 6 in 10 adults expressing this view in newly released findings from Pew Research Center survey. The share of the public saying science and religion are often in conflict is up modestly from 55% in 2009, when Pew Research conducted a similar survey on religion and science. People's sense that there is generally a conflict between religion and science seem to have less to do with their own religious beliefs than it does with their perceptions of other people's beliefs. Less than 1/3 of Americans polled in the new survey say that their personal religious beliefs conflict with science, while 2/3 say there's no conflict between their own beliefs and science. Moreover, the view that science and religion often conflict is particularly common among Americans who are themselves not very religiously observant, as measured by the frequency of attendance at worship services. Okay, in some regard, Robert, you were telling us during the break that you deal with this a lot on the college campus, but in some regard, this is sort of a Captain Obvious kind of
well, exactly. I mean,
kind of report.
This is a no-brainer right here, actually, but it's just confirming what we already know, is that people that are not very religious don't understand the difference between faith and reason and how those things work together. And they tend to say that faith is just this kind of separate thing that only religious people deal with, and we are scientists, and therefore we're very rational and reasonable, and so the two shall never meet. And, of course, when you do, we had a long discussion about this up at one of the local colleges where we were talking about that very subject. Has science done away with faith? And we went through the whole, I mean, I won't get in the weeds on it, but we went through the whole thing of the scientific, of scientific inquiry, how you develop a hypothesis.
Scientific method. Yeah.
Right, the method, and how you go from that to a theory and then to a law. And we were talking about how the scientists do that and the use of faith in their process. Mm-hmm. And, the Latin word really just means trust. That's what faith is. And so you start trusting. They build the case for the evidence upon which they make their judgments of whether it's the hypothesis is right or not. So faith and reason actually work together quite well in the scientific community, but they try to make this distinction between the two, and frankly, it works in theology as well. Why did Paul write what he wrote? John said it. Luke said it. We give you the evidence so that you might believe. And so there is a process in that of faith and reason on both sides. So, yeah, they go together. And
Mark it down. I agree with Robert. Doc, go ahead. That's all I've got to say. I think Robert explained that very well between faith and reason.
Yeah.
We all agree with you. So
done. And thank you for joining us.
Thank you for joining us.
Talk about fishing.
Play the
but
close.
I think he makes a great point. I think those who
play.
don't know faith and assume that those things are juxtaposed, and there are just most theologians, most pastors are doing both those things. They're doing faith and reason. We're trying to do those kinds of things. I think that's exactly right.
Yeah.
The argument about faith and reason, or science and religion. Let's put it back on that topic. Okay. Really, science and religion often get muddied when you bring up how the history of science being intertwined so much with religious observance. That how much of science came out of ages when it was the monks who were the ones who were exploring science. Just last week I was talking about glasses and the evolution of eyewear. It comes out of some of the monks who were the scribes, who were the ones who read before other people read.
No, I think that's right. Film is another example.
Yeah.
Film was shadow puppets on the walls and stuff like that came out of monastic stuff. Surprisingly enough, I mean, there's all these kind of things.
And on Wednesday nights, we still have an alchemy group. We're very close.
You're still working on the gold formula.
We're very close to the gold formula right now.
I want to get involved in that.
Yeah,
That sounds interesting.
Spoken like a Methodist.
I mean, it's been
late.
said that you really wouldn't have science without faith. Because, and particularly, the monotheistic faiths, it depends on what your concept of God is, but, the monotheistic faiths believe, and that's the Jewish, Christian, and Muslim faiths, believe that there is one God and that he's, to a degree, knowable, and that he creates an orderly universe. And so that allowed them to start looking at general revelation. We tend to think of the stars, but it's everything, creation, and that there is an order to that. There is a design, a teleos to that creation, and we can follow that. That's the roots of the scientific revolution. Really, is that it's knowable.
This whole thing is a faith issue because the whole scientific method, based on a hypothesis, is the ability of a human being to think beyond his or herself, to think there must be something more.
That's right.
To have that to go back to your faith, I mean, that is the essence of our faith.
I think that's
it's not things that we see, as Paul said, but things that we don't see. So it's the very root of the scientific method. It's not in conflict at all. It's the beginning of science.
Yeah. Well, the difference is, just to make sure we're speaking it correctly, is that, and I'm not saying you didn't, I'm just saying to add to it, is the fact that when we start examining creation, when we start looking at creation, what we're doing is discovering rather than us creating. It's already there. In other words, all the new discoveries, that all the new information that new to us has been there all along.
We're just improving the lens.
We're just getting better at seeing it. And so we're literally, I mean, that's what's going on. And now in the whole cosmological questions and all of that, the tools have just gotten so much better that we're able to, and whether it's in the macro or in the micro, we're able to identify these things better.
I don't know what my teacher's faith experience was at the time, but I remember being taught the scientific method, and because my teacher added a part to it that wasn't in the traditional scientific method, and it was always next question. is that whatever result you came from should elicit more questions.
Correct.
And Mark, isn't that really what a theological expression is to always have another question?
No, I think that's exactly right. Robert quoted Greek. Am I allowed to quote Latin if he's quoting Greek? No.
Sure.
No, there's a phrase that we always use, faith seeking understanding. We get it from Anselm, but it's faith seeking understanding, and I think that works both ways. Essentially what that means is what we have been saying here, is that faith uses reason in a way to help it understand itself. And that's kind of what our faith is. It's not getting particularly all these wonderful answers, but it's moving in questions and moving in answers and that kind of thing. But it also works the other way, that there is a faith that is included in our reason, right? Mm-hmm. So there's reason that's included in our faith, and then it goes the opposite way too. There is a faith that our reason, and we will reason correctly. You have to have faith that somehow that will work out for us, which I think Doc put very, very well when he was talking about that we must, we move towards these things and we believe them to be correct.
Well,
right?
then
there's a faith in that.
But we see the conflicts come up, and I think sometimes because scientists deal with an orderly fashion. So you say just again the scientific method, you're going to deal with it in an orderly fashion, an order of operation,
correct,
to come to a conclusion. Whereas we may take what was it, Outler, who took Wesleyan thought to create a Wesleyan quadrilateral of scripture, reason, tradition, and experience. And they don't necessarily come in an order. Mm-hmm. They feed on each other. So, and that's probably more of a faith experience than a science one. I don't know if I'm explaining that well, but it does give us a different perspective.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. And I think Robert said this. I think you're getting at how do we come up with knowledge, or how do we know something, right? It's kind of an epistemological question. Mm-hmm. How do we know something? Well, we use reason, we use the tradition, we use history, we also use our experience, which is a very kind of scientific category, I think. Mm-hmm. And for us, we also use faith. I think those who deny that they use faith are just not paying attention to the faith that they have in their own experience, right? You have to say, I'm actually experiencing this phone right here, or this microphone, and I have faith that my eyes and my mind are perceiving this correctly, right? And so there is, even in reason, there is a faith. And I think that's precisely what Outler's doing with the Wesley quadrilateral. He's saying, how do we come at a concept of God? Well, we pull experience, we pull tradition, we pull reason, we pull faith as well. And then we start to work with those things, and it gives us a kind of knowledge.
Yeah, and it's fascinating.
Of course, that's a gift from God.
There's a measurement back to reality. How do we expose reality? And I think that's really what we're talking about.
See you next week.
Thank you for joining us for Faith Matters. Email your comments, questions, and suggestions to faithmatters@thetalkstation.com.
Give me faith, trust what you say, that you're good and your love is great. I'm broken inside, I give you my life. Give me faith.
Faith Matters is a production of The Talk Station.